Hey there, friends. It is good to be in the shop with you today. Long week at work, so I am so happy to be here in the shop. Uh, Happy to share with you this new project, which is the Child's Toolbox. Now, the project is designed for you to get out in the shop with your young woodworker and 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 build this together. In fact, I can't wait till my grandkids are old enough to do this. We're several years away, but that's really looking forward to being in the shop with them to be able to do things like this. The video is going to give you step-by-step instructions on how to do it, including the materials and cut list, all that stuff. By the time you finish the video, you should be able to build this, even if you have minimal woodworking skills yourself. But you can have a lot of fun. The video is going to be a little bit long, but there's going to be timestamps, so you can jump around. Don't feel like you have to watch the whole thing. Follow the timestamps. And for those of you that are interested, there are going to be printed instructions that you can download off the website, and more information about that at the end of the video. So let's talk about building the Child's Toolbox. All right. As you know, we have been going through the Teacher's Handbook of Sloyd and learning basic hand tool skills as was taught by Otto Saloman in the 1880s, 1890s. It's a really good book. And what that has taught us is that there's a series of skills and exercises that you have to go through to learn your the basic skills, but those are only good if you put them into work in projects. So the idea is get into projects as quickly as you can. And for this particular exercise, we are going to bring several of those, or this particular project, we're going to bring several of those exercises together. So let's take a look at that. So our first exercise is number 5 from the Teacher's Handbook of Sloyd, which is sawing off. And we're going to be doing both cross cuts and oblique cuts to get the shape of the box. Exercise 2, checking square, where we will be checking square both of the cuts and of the assembly. And this is a great opportunity for your young woodworker to really start learning patience and accuracy. Exercise number 8 is edge planing. We will be using a smoothing plane for ours, or a block plane, but you can do edge planing with sandpaper as well. Number 11, small diameter drilling, and this is for the pilot holes, either for the screws or nails, however you decide to put this together. Number 14, large diameter boring. Remember, boring is just the official term that woodworkers use for drilling. And we're going to be boring a hole to match the handle size. Exercise 39 is gluing 2 boards together. And then we're going to finish up with exercise 51, which is fixing with screws. They call it fixing with screws. We're going to screw 2 boards together, or we're going to fix with nails, which is the same thing. You're going to nail the wood together as a joint. So now let's take a look at the tools and materials that you're going to need for the project. First of all, we're going to use some type of crosscut saw. I have the Japanese pull saw here, and we're going to use the crosscut side of that, not the rip cut, for this project. I also recommend a square and, of course, a pencil for marking. I like the combination square just because it's so versatile, inexpensive, and accurate enough for our projects. You'll need a tape measure for laying out the longer lines. Egg beater drill. You'll also need if you don't have the egg beater drill, you can use just a standard drill. That's fine. I like the egg beater drill just because it's fun and inexpensive. And you're going to size the bit for what you use. I actually put a 1/8 bit in here thinking I was going to use a number 8 screw, but I'm going to use a number 6, so I got to go get a smaller bit for that. All right, next, you're going to need a brace and bit. Because I'm using 7/8 inch dowel stock, I've got a number 15 bit in here. Of quite honestly, most people don't have that. So again, a standard drill with a spade bit would work just fine. You want to size your bit to the dowel rod you're going to use. Depending on whether you use nails or screws, you're going to either need a hammer or a screwdriver. I'm using screws, so we're going to go with the screwdriver there. And last but not least is the block plane. The block plane is optional because we're also going to have sandpaper in this project. But this is really nice for easing those rough or sharp edges. The materials list is actually very simple because we're using standard dimension lumber. That makes the milling side of this a lot easier. I am using 1x4 pine, which makes it 3/4 of an inch thick by 3.5 inches wide. This is going to be the sides of the toolbox. And then I'm also using 1x6, which again is 3/4 inch, 5.5 inches wide. This is going to be the bottom and the sides. Using just white pine, the cheapest pine they had at the home center. The great thing about this project, though, is you can use whatever you have on hand. Once we get to the end of the video, if you feel like this project is a little bit too small, you can substitute the 1x6 bottom and go with a 1x8, and that'll give you a wider. You could even, instead of doing 1x4 sides, you could do 1x6 sides, make it quite a bit larger. So this is your project, so you get to decide. Handle material is 7/8 inch dowel. Again, if you happen to have 3/4 inch dowel or 1 inch dowel laying around your shop, those would work just fine. I did not have any dowel material long enough, so I went to the home center and got some 7/8 inch dowel stock. In addition to that, you're going to need sandpaper. This helps smooth some of the edges, particularly if you're not using the block plane. The sandpaper is going to come in handy there. You're going to need glue for the edges, and you're going to need nails or screws depending on how you want to connect the butt joints. I'm using screws, but nails would work just fine. All right, we're going to start off by sizing the bottom. But before we actually start cutting on this, we want to check to make sure that our ends are square. You can't assume that the ends are square coming out of the home center. A lot of times they are, but a lot of times they are not. Okay, so as I look here, it is square in this direction, so that's a good sign. But you also want to check this way. Make sure it is sitting square in that direction as well. It is, so we're in luck there. If not, we would want to take our sandpaper or our block plane and kind of square that up. The square from the end to the face is actually more important than square the other way. Both are important, but keeping this edge square will really help the project going forward. So we're going to measure out 13 inches. And why 13? Well, it's somewhat arbitrary, but only somewhat, because the Japanese ryoba saw that I intend to put in here comes apart very easily, and that handle is 12 inches and the blade is 10 inches, so those would actually fit in there very nicely. So we come across with our square, and this small combination square is not long enough, but it works. Okay, put your pencil in first, move the square to that, and then draw your line. You'll want to come in then from the other side, put your pencil first, pull the square up to that, hold it tight, and that becomes your cut line. You can see this is way too long, so we're going to need something to help keep this up like this. So we just go into the scrap bin, grab something that's about the same thickness as the the bench hook, and then we line that up. Now, a couple of things. If you don't have a bench hook, you can actually just make yourself a cutting guide. And all this is a piece of scrap wood, preferably plywood, that we know we have a flat edge. You pick another scrap piece of wood and you put that in there, but you have to make sure this face is square to that side. Okay? Having a bench hook or a cutting guide is absolutely critical for two reasons. One, it does help you get a square cut, and that's very important. The other thing is, with these little hands, we need to have something between the blade and the hand. You need to have something between the blade and the hand. And a saw guide really does a good job of that. So we can either use the bench hook, okay, with the crosscut blade, line it up, and again, just kind of gently pull it and let the saw do the work. All right. Or take your saw guide, line that up just like you would the bench hook, place the saw here, and again, let the saw do the work. Do not grip the saw hard. Be careful not to twist it. All right. Once you do that, let's take our square. All right. We got a pretty good cut there, and square it this way. And what we see here is that we're close to square, but not square enough. Okay, so this is where you can now, you can put it into the bench vise and take a couple of shavings here to square that up. If you have the bench hook, you can just put this in here like that. Grab your smoothing plane, and I actually like using the number 5, and the closer you get to square, the better your project is actually going to be. So that's close. Let's do just a little bit more. There we go. And we are square. Set this piece aside, and then we're going to use the same piece of lumber, and we're going to cut off the end pieces. Now this is again somewhat arbitrary. I'm going to go with 9 inches just because I think 9 inches will look good. And we will do one more. Back to the instructions. Mark the link, for the second piece. All right, find the center of the end piece. And this is where it's helpful to have a ruler. It's not absolutely necessary, but it is helpful. And what we would do is take the ruler, put it on the 0 mark, and then tilt until we get a even number. In this case, 6. And we'll mark a 3. All right. Three there, and then we're going to just join those two. Okay, that center line becomes helpful when we get ready to set our angles and then to drill our hole. To mark 1 inch from the center line at the top. So right here at the center, we want to go 1 inch on either side. Just put a mark there and a mark there. 1 inch on either side. Taking the board that you're going to use for your side, you will lay this on the piece, and you'll mark over here this edge and this edge. And then taking your straight edge, you will go from this edge to this point here. You'll repeat over here on this side. You'll go from this point to that point. And now what we need to do is take out, we'll just mark these as waste. We'll need to take out those two to give us our angle. Now what you can do is take your two pieces together, make sure that they are lined up, and then put them both in the vise together. Okay. So what's important is you need to make sure that this line right here is relatively vertical. It doesn't have to be exact, but it's got to be relatively vertical. And then we're going to take our saw and we're going to cut both of these at the same time. You can cut them one at a time, and it's really dependent on the strength of your young woodworker. All right, then we'll come in with our block plane, smoothing plane, or even sandpaper, and we'll clean these edges up. Hey, I got all 4 of the pieces of waste cut off. I did find that it was much easier to do it one at a time rather than stacking them up. When you stack them up, it's easier to make the cuts match on both sides. When you do them separately, you're going to have a little bit of variation. Not really going to impact the box, but I took my number 5, took a couple of strokes here, evened them all up, and now we're good. So it is now time to lay out for the hole for the handle. All right, got our auger bit with a number 14. Next step is to prepare the ends to be attached to the bottom. And to do that, we're going to drill 3 pilot holes, and we want to measure up 3/8 of an inch from the bottom, and that would put it in the middle of the bottom piece. Combination square to 3/8, and then you can just mark your line straight across. Let's go 1 inch from this side, 1 inch from there, and we'll do 1 in the middle. I've got my egg beater drill with the appropriate size bit for a number 6 screw. Whatever screw you're using, you're going to need to size your bit appropriately. Of course, if you're going with nails, you're going to want it to be as small as possible. All right, so find a way to clamp it to your vise or to your bench. These egg beater drills can spin this wood before you know it and give you a pretty good smack. All right. Now, just to help us countersink the heads, I'm going to come in with a 1/4 inch bit. Just to give me a little bit of a kind of a dimple there. All right, then we'll repeat it for the other side. All right, we already have our pilot holes drilled in the end piece. Now we just have to extend it into the piece down below. And we'll take this off, put a little bit of glue down there. All right. Got number 6 1.5 wood screws. Just go ahead and get them started here. I'm using a screwdriver, but of course, if you've got an electric drill driver, that's going to work just fine. All right, after you got that screwed in, now is a good time to check square. We might be able to adjust it if necessary. Ooh. That means this cut was pretty good. Pretty good. All right, come in the other way, and we're going to do the same thing. All right, look at that. It is starting to look like a toolbox. Let's go ahead and close in these sides now. In order to do that, we're going to grab our piece of 1x4. And, of course, you can measure it, or to get a more accurate reading, just take your toolbox, line it up on this end, and mark where you want your cut. Now you need to make sure that you put some kind of mark over here to indicate that this piece is going to be over on this side. Now, we've talked about using the bench hook to do a lot of these cuts, but it is possible to do it just by clamping the board to the bench and cutting it that way. All right. So we're going to use our saw guide that we have here. Okay. Make sure that's firmly up against there. Line it up. And then, again, light grip. And every time I say that, I'm really talking to myself because I know you've heard me say this at least a dozen times already. I just tend to grip this thing so hard and it knocks the thing out of alignment. Light grip, let the saw do the work. Keep the wood between the saw and your little one's fingers, and just back and forth. Now we're going to use the other side of the box. And mark it over there. All right, and this one we're going to put a different mark on the ends, just so we can keep them matched up. You could do A's and B's or whatever you really prefer. So we got our X's on this side, X's on this board. So we're going to take our glue and we're going to put a bead of glue on the faces here so that we'll get a nice, absolutely solid fit there. All right, so if you've got clamps, this is a good time just to help hold things together as we're getting ready to put screws in there. Let's set our combination square back to 3/8 of an inch. That way we can keep it as close as possible to the center of the bottom board. Let the tool do the work. Why didn't I think of this before? This is exactly why we want 12-inch clamps. You've probably figured out by now that if you're using nails, this goes a whole lot faster. And nails would certainly, nails are traditional. I just feel that the screws are going to give you a longer life. You know what just occurred to me? I have 3 egg beaters sitting here. Why do I have to go back and forth? And I know what you're probably asking yourself. Why do you have 3 egg beaters? Well, to be honest, when I'm out shopping for something completely unrelated to egg beaters, whether it's at a yard sale, estate sale, or something like that, and I find an egg beater for $3 to $5, I can't say no. Can't say no. All right, let's flip it over and get the sides on the, or get the other side on. What do you think? We get, this is actually the pith here. Traditionally, you would have put that inside so nobody could see it, but I guess I kind of like the look of it. So I'm going to put it on the outside. And it's my box, so I can do that. When it's your box, you get to pick the way you want to do it. Or when it's your kid's box, that's even better. They get to pick. Little beeswax may help the screws go in a bit easier. Okay, we are in the home stretch. It is now time to put the handle on. So we're going to take our dowel stock, and that's nice and clean on that end. And we'll just, rather than taking the tape measure, we will just hold it up here. We're going to eyeball it, and we want it to hang over just a little bit. So we'll come out about maybe a ½ inch over there, and we'll mark it then on this side. Okay. All right. Cutting round stock is a bit tricky. You are going to need a bench hook or something, or you're going to have to hold it while your little one is doing the sawing. This is not an operation for a young woodworker to be doing by themselves, but this has got to be rested firmly. Otherwise, it's just going to roll around. Okay? Take our crosscut saw. All right. Now it's going to be a good idea. It's going to be a good idea to chamfer these edges. This should be a really, really tight fit. And actually, it wasn't nearly as tight as I thought it would be. All right. Classic case of you should never trust the home center. A 7/8 inch dowel from the home center is not necessarily 7/8 inches. I've had type cases where the measurements were extremely tight, and that is not the case here. This thing slides in freely, and that is not what we wanted. I mean, it's not a terrible thing, but in order for us to go with this, we're going to have to cap it off here at the end, or we're going to have to fill the holes and make it tight. So here's what we're going to do. I got all this sawdust laying around. We are going to put glue and sawdust in there. We're going to put glue, and then we're going to stuff it with sawdust, try and get us a good tight fit. think I'm gonna have to add a disclaimer to my paperwork saying don't trust the dowel side, don't trust the label. All right, we have ourselves a toolbox. Simple design, classic, but certainly functional. Now it's time to fill it with tools. All right, classic toolbox design, one that could last for many, many years. So only thing left to do now is fill it with tools. So this is a great place for them to store the tools as they make them. We've got a wooden tri-square here. We've got a pinch rod. That's my favorite one. Maybe you find a $3 egg beater drill that can go in there. The other advantage of this particular design, while it might not look too elegant, you could actually drill holes here for pencils and things like that. So one last thing to do, and that is just take some sandpaper. I got 120 grit here, and we're just going to soften all of these edges. You can do this with a block plane if you want. But 120 grit sandpaper will work just fine. You can sand the pencil marks off the end. Now that the box is assembled, just take some 120 grit sandpaper and hit all these sharp edges. Two things it's going to do for you. It's going to reduce the risk of splinters or any kind of injuries from a sharp edge. It makes it last longer, less chance of any kind of breakage. So just hit all the edges. You can use the same sandpaper to rub away all the pencil marks. And then after that, You can decide whether you want to paint it or finish it. I'm going to leave it just like this. I like the natural wood. Last thing to do is fill it with tools. The danger of making one of these is your young woodworker is going to expect that they're going to have tools to go in there. So maybe you find yourself a $3 egg beater that can go in there. One of the projects will be a tri-square. Okay, that can go in there for sure. Pinch rod. This is a nice, simple project for them to do. That can go in there. We'll add chisels. We'll add a mallet, other things like that. So by the time we're done, your young woodworker will have their very own fully functional tool set. All right, so we talked at the beginning about plans. You notice I was working off of this sheet here. This is a free printout that you can get off of my website. The link will be down below. Just so you know, it is going through my store, so it's going to ask you things like name, address, and all that. It's assuming that you're going to have something shipped to you. You don't need to put your real address and all that stuff in there. The only thing you really need is an email address. Make sure you get an email address in there. That you'll get a link to download this straight from my website, free of charge. Just like the swivel lid box we did a few weeks back, this one also will be free of charge. Okay, fun project. I think your young ones, your young woodworkers will really enjoy doing this. This is something that they can put to use and have for many years to come. Okay, I think that's going to do it, friends. Take care. God bless.